Welcome to the Jump Tapes. This is the place where we unpack real people's career changes and how they got there, the things that they had to risk, the fears they had to face. Today, we're actually taking a unique perspective. We're talking with Gareth Fox, executive, high-class recruiter. I've known him for many years now for personal and for professional in both the placement and providing opportunities. So we have a really unique relationship. I've got to see him in action in multiple ways. Take the floor, introduce yourself, a little bit about your background, your history, and a little disclaimer of what this episode might be about.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, Gareth Fox, co-founder of MagniFind, been doing tech sales recruitment for the best part of a decade now. We specialize in helping, seed funded through to multiple series startups with their go-to-market hiring. So that could be sales, marketing, customer success, through to leadership and C-suite. But yeah, I mean, we try and stick to what we're good at. If you come into us with developer roles or two technical roles, then can we place them? Of course, but certainly not our strong suit.
Simplicity is the golden nugget there.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's in terms of speed to market as well, which is what customers wish to see. Obviously we like to put our best foot forward and stay within our lane as much as possible.
Love it. We're going to dive into a few topics today around the candidate space, working with recruiters, some different perspective, I think, than what is typically out there. So little disclaimer, which we were talking about beforehand, sometimes you're not going to hear things, especially as a candidate, that is going to make you feel great. And so I think that, when you realize what some of the systems are in place or some of the challenges of working with recruiters, with what they're actually looking for versus what we think they're looking for, you kind of think, oh man, this recruiter's blocking me. This recruiter is just trying to get a paycheck or just trying to get a placement, or they're not being very helpful. But I know in my experience, and working with you and other recruiters, that it is one of the biggest advantages having that relationship with someone that has the inside scoop on job roles and is looking for very specific things. You end up being either a coach and an advocate, or someone that's like, no, this isn't good for my company. So
yeah, I think obviously touch on that. The market is incredibly sensitive right now. We all know that there is work out there, but there's also a lot of people who have been out of work for 3 months, 6 months. I seen a post on LinkedIn yesterday saying 12 months. I'm really starting to get stressed. So I think heading into the session, it's just like, I'm not saying this to rub anyone up the wrong way. I'm just trying to give some real insights and some true thoughts, feelings, experiences, maybe add some value to some people's searches, but again, as we know, recruiters will always get boycotted to a certain degree. And I'm not kind of playing the tiny violin there, but we can only do the best we can do, right? So I think I'd just like to say that up front, if someone likes something they don't hear, it's nothing personal.
I love it. Okay, you've all been warned. So move forward if it ain't the topic for you. Okay, I would not be staying true to myself if I didn't bring up your own career jump, because you didn't start this way. So can you give me the TLDR here of how you got to where you are and where you came from?
Yeah, and I think, the toughest career jump was the career jump to kind of or the industry I'm in now, should I say, not exactly, MagniFind. That wasn't an easy decision at the time. But, I was in finance quite heavily as a teen, 18 through to, early 20s. Then I went into kind of a automotive brokerage tech startup. They built their own software. I kind of sold that on. But in the main, it was like car gurus in the US, I suppose. Worked through from being on the phones, cheeky little so-and-so, kind of made team leader. And I was head of sales, like mid-20s, like far too young to be head of sales, in my opinion. I think I had 10 managers. That's a lie, 8 managers, 80-something employees. But I also had a friend who was in tech recruitment, and it was like he was going through the ranks, I was going through the ranks, and was marrying pay slips. And it just got to a point where his was far exceeding mine. And so one day, I entertained the conversation. I actually had to take over a 50% pay cut on my base salary to take the leap. So you have to understand that was backing myself. And was it a horrible first year? Absolutely. Savings were getting burned. I think my first year in recruitment, I earned like 6K commission. And prior to that, I was earning, 35 commission on top of my base salary, which I'd already halved. So it was, that was the biggest questionable career jump that I've made. And then, of course, I did agency for my employer at the time for 5 years, Manchester, San Francisco, Chicago, and then eventually took the leap to join my business partner, Rick, to grow out MagniFind. And I think we're now in year 5, maybe year 4, year 5. Year 5 for him, year 4 for me.
I love that. I mean, you bring up a point though, which is you took a really big pay cut risk, which, I think a lot of people do. I mean, you have to be cognizant of it and you have to look at your own finances and if it works for you or not. But the reality is that even if today you're not in the position to actually do something like that, you can start planning for it, because if you're planning for something that is really like strong within your DNA of like, this is what I want to do for my life, then you start making better choices. You make choices that are more targeted for that. So I love that you bring up that point. Dive in and let's start talking about, your current role. You're talking candidates all the time. What do you think that they are misunderstanding or that might be misrepresented about your role that as a candidate, you're like, I wish you would just understand this is?
I think there's two answers from my perspective on that one, and the first one is that we can be deemed as job blockers and not job enablers, which is completely false, right? I mean, there is retained agreements, there's exclusive agreements, which in some cases makes the placement tougher because the client's expectations are that little bit higher because they paid up front. But there's a big percentage of our work that we do on a contingent basis. So what people need to understand is we don't get paid until we place. Of course, we're going to be an advocate of anybody that we're representing.
Yeah.
But I mean, in essence, it is just a case of working with us, but understanding that we also have a brief from our client. So if we continue to miss the mark in terms of the candidates we're representing and putting forward, and we're not fitting the brief, our contract, whether that is again exclusive, retained, contingent, is at risk. And I think a lot of people seeking work, especially those out of work, do misunderstand that. We can sometimes get frustrated calls saying, Gareth, I fit the job advert. But of course, recruiters are notoriously known for condensing their job advert because they don't want to give their client's name away. Because of course, recruitment itself is a dog eat dog world. So it's not as if we kind of just go and throw the client names out there or, maybe announce their exact Series A funding, how many employees, location, because another recruiter could just go, I've got a candidate for that, and just ring up that company and introduce. So there's a reason why we're restrictive, which is deemed fair by a lot of people who are seeking in the market, but they need to understand what's at stake from our perspective there, which may sound a little selfish, but we've all got to do our jobs to a certain standard. The second I'd also say is we get perceived as HR, and when that's not the reality. Do we make HR's life and talent acquisition's life easier? Absolutely. We partner with them, take out the search time, screening time, and we'd like to think that we only put A1 players and relevant candidates forward, but ultimately our job is a sales role. We're mainly working with startups, so they're no names. We have to sell the company to the candidate. The candidate needs to be sold to the client. So because we're in the tech sales world, it needs to be understood that we're actually doing the job that we're recruiting you for. But we're just selling our services. We're not selling the software. Some get it, pleasant. Some do get it. Just not everybody. People just think you're a CV pusher, resume pusher.
I think and a really important differentiator there is you are independent. You are selling your company and your services versus internal recruiters, which their whole purpose, their whole compensation is totally different when they're working with the company, internally and creating the job of working with the managers. I know just from working with you and other recruiters that your reputation is actually the best thing that you could actually have. I mean, that is the way with everybody, but especially you all, because when you are reaching out to people, you want them to respond. You're not just throwing things on the wall and being like, hey, let me get 100 people that kind of look like they might be a good fit, because the reality is that they're probably not. You're actually screening them. You're looking at them. You are taking the time to do your due diligence. And so, I don't know, I think it's kind of an honor when you get a recruiter's email and they're like, hey, I looked at this, and they've got really specifics and try to line you up with this job.
And the same with cold calling, right? I mean, that falls into the same bucket. You'll call them and you'll get the VP of sales who'll scream and shout at you when that's exactly what their staff are doing. But then, just as you said, you will also get those where it's like a little ego stroke for the day. oh God, so someone wanted me for a job today. I'm not looking,
Yeah.
but thanks.
I
So
think
I prefer that mindset.
I do too. So you kind of talked a little bit about this, but how much control do you actually have on who gets the job, who gets the interviews? Because I'll tell you, I've worked with people that are like, I was pounding the door of this recruiter, pounding the door, like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And they're frustrated because the recruiter that was once so helpful is not necessarily so helpful anymore as they start. So tell me a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
I would say it's less than historically. I think in the past we would have, we still have relationships like you and I. So I mean, you still have relationships with hiring managers, and you used to have a bit of weight. So you could find, a really good salesperson. They might be selling data and AI, but they want to break into cybersecurity. I'd say in 2022, in the hiring boom, post COVID, well, coming out of COVID, you could ring a hiring manager and say, look, I've got an SHIT salesperson here. You should speak to them. And 9 times out of 10, based on the relationship, they'd be like, "Go on, Gareth, let's get them booked in," and it would bode well. They typically take a punt on them because number one, we vouch for them. Two, they trust the relationship. The issue that we're finding now is, the expectations of board members. They're getting better, but again, 2023, 2024 were quite, eye-watering. ROs were joining companies or interviewing with companies, getting to board expectations and being hesitant to take roles and maybe taking VP roles. I know a handful of people who are still in VP roles who were previous CROs, but I just think right now we have minimal influence. Of course, it's down to us who we shortlist and put forward. Ultimately, the company, the hiring manager, is going to hire who they deem is the best fit for the job. And it's quite funny because we'll have our own kind of ideas and rankings internally. Not that we share them or prioritize everyone because we want to give everyone a fair shot, but we're also very, very surprised and shocked that sometimes our maybe number 4 in the shortlist or number 5 in the shortlist actually gets the job. So which is interesting, and we sit there and sometimes at the end, once they've executed and hired their person, we'll be like, that was actually our number 4. So we found the right candidate, but Mrs. Smith was going to get the job, but Mr. Smith got it. So yeah. It's quite interesting.
Do you work with a lot of like boomerang candidates where maybe they were applied for one? Do you keep that database with candidates to where you can look for them?
Yeah, and they come back through to us as well. I mean, there's an instance 2 Novembers ago where someone I'd placed once got to a lot of finals historically, kind of reached out, and we didn't have anything for them. But then again, going to the point I made earlier, we was putting job postings out, and the candidate would then call and they'd be like, Gareth, I fit the bill, and it was like you stopping me from getting a shot at this job. And that's where again some of the frustrations kick in, and not meaning to call anybody out, but it's also not the right way to approach a recruiter. If we could place you, we would place you. We're not internal recruiters here. We get paid on success. Even if that is retained or exclusive, the biggest portion of the fee is typically paid upon completion. Yeah, of course we get boomerangs. I mean, but that's all down to your own personal reputation or your business's reputation, how well you've worked and cooperated previously to whoever they wish to reach out to you again.
So one more piece on this. A lot of times people think maybe that you get more feedback from the manager. I'm curious, what level of feedback do you actually get from people that you're working for, the company's looking to hire, on the candidates that are interviewing and how they perform?
Yeah, my profile says no nonsense for a reason. I'm pretty much to the point, and as honest as I can be, because I do truly believe no matter how high level it is or how detailed it is, whether they like to hear it or not could help them with their next process, especially if it's negative. Now, one good judgment there of who we like to work with and who we don't like to work with is also how well or how well not. That's probably the wrong way to say it, but how they receive the feedback. Because if it's not well and it's like, oh, kicking and screaming, it's like, is this the type of person that we want to be working with? So yeah, I mean, there's maybe 1 or 2 instances where the feedback was probably that brutal. I'm like, I cannot say this, but we're talking maybe once or twice in, again, 10 years.
Okay, so I'm throwing you a little curveball here. One, have you noticed a difference in working with candidates of certain generations and how they've presented or received feedback? Have you noticed any big differentiators? We hear about this all the time in the news now with, styles, how they like to work, and it's, it's kind of a joke, but it's a reality. So I'm really curious, do you notice any difference?
I wouldn't say per whatever the brackets are. I'd say that there is certainly been a shift and a noticeable shift of people not kind of investing as much in the process. I think a lot of people used to be loyal to their companies, Pleasant. We look at the Microsofts of the world, the Facebooks, Amazons, But the reality is corporates are no longer loyal to their employees either. And I think when those people who've been with the company 8 years, 10 years, maybe even 20 years with the Microsofts of the world started to get laid off, people have started to realize that they are just a number. And I think that also has transpired to how people not just treat an interview process, but treat their current employer as well. My previous employer, I'd work, I'd be up at 6 and I'd leave at 8 or 9 working the US market from Manchester. Do I see many people out there doing that now? It's like core hours. Let's get to happy hour. People are just not putting in as much as they used to, in my opinion, to not necessarily the job search, but if they're a candidate of desire, which we'll probably get into in a little while, they know they have a slight position of power, which is sometimes they can, show a lack of interest or investment. I'm seeing more and more of that as time goes on. Yeah. Because why should you dedicate an extra 15 hours a week to a company, or dedicate your life, or maybe that approach you get from a recruiter 3 years down the line? Why could you, when you could be, PE firm can come in, you get let go. Company runs out of money, you get let go. I get it, but this is also what's part of the problem of those that are now struggling to find it. Maybe they've again not been that loyal once too many times, which is then making it difficult for people to pay people such as I to place them.
I think one of the best experience, for me, was losing my job. The first time was like, what the heck? I was young in my career, and but it does teach you a really, really hard but important lesson, which is no matter what you feel like you're putting into it or how much you take ownership of your role, things can always happen outside of the control. And the person that matters the most and cares the most is the person that owns the business. So if you're working for someone else, that is always going to be the bottom line. And no matter the relationship, no matter how you feel you're doing with your job, that's the bottom line. And unless you're a founder and you're making your own money, you've got investors, everyone. There's always someone to have that oversight. You have to be your own little wolf and hunt. But you also can't put yourself in a position where you're an easy target or easy prey to let go, because there are so many people looking for jobs, so many of them. So when the doors close, you're having conversations with the company that you're placing for. What are the qualities that make you fight for a candidate? Go to bat for them, become their biggest advocate.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, again, just to refer back to your previous point, or our previous point, is that there's only so much influence we can have. So what do I get excited about is finding someone who's number one from, a competitor or a very adjacent space, or they've got a sword at something that's at least a similar product. Right now, stability, and I know that's a big thing, and there's a lot of people kicking and screaming, because I can just say, look, I understand why people, and it sounds very hypocritical and patronizing, but I understand why people are not being loyal. But the sad thing is, those that have not been loyal are the ones that are sometimes struggling to get the interview. And again, that's what kind of the point I was making, that's where we're getting the kickback. We could have someone who's worked at a competitor for 10 years, but they've had 6 roles in those 10 years. Some limited hiring managers will be open-minded, but immediately just be like, Gareth, I'm not interviewing that person. But in terms of, qualities of people that I like to work with, it's simple: open-minded, cooperative, show a genuine interest in the opportunity, are willing to do their research, because I'm sure from being an interviewer and an interviewee, a lack of research is the number one reason for not passing an interview, right?
This isn't high school when you're pulling an all-nighter or a couple of hours and throw a presentation together and you're hoping to get your passing grade. One of the things I've seen just within this market is that lack of preparation, interview quality is coming because a lot of people are actually getting a lot of initial interviews, or they're getting those initial callbacks. So I was working with someone who's actually had more meetings from interviews than than she was when she was in sales. And it was because
Wow.
she was interviewing a ton, but the ones that she really wanted, there was less focus, less narrowing in on how do I really stand out in this role, because she was exhausted with all the other interviews because she just really wanted, she needed a new job. And that's a
Yeah.
hard mindset to have to change or have to switch, because you think, okay, the more at bats I have, maybe the better it is. But then you kind of show up and it's 70% when you really needed to be at 120%.
Yeah, and you've also got to factor in, the job search in itself is stressful. So of course you're going to welcome anyone that's going to open the door to you. But the reality is, I mean, you do 3 interviews in a day with 3 different companies. You'll sleep well in the evening, but there's a chance of again being underprepared, tripping and treading, wrong company name, wrong hiring manager name. Things like that may seem minor, but there's a decent volume of people who get expedited from processes from just that minor mistake.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So my advice on that opinion, respect your time, and also have your ranking system on my number 1 op, number 2 op, and there's certain things you could do on that front. Your number 1, right? We want to speak tomorrow. Shift your number 4. It doesn't matter if your number 4 is, push that to the end of the week. Invest in your number 1 opportunity. There's only so much rescheduling that will be accepted before it's obvious you're not interested. You've got to use little things like that to your advantage. But I'd say no more than 3 interviews a day and try and space them out as opposed to cram them in.
That's great advice, especially with the number 1, the number 4, because I think people forget that. And it's like, if I move this one, it's going to risk something, but it actually shows a whole lot more intention with the other one, which is bound to come back to you in a positive way. So what is the thing that has made someone the most memorable in a good way? And then things that you have in your pocket now: red flags, red flags, red flags. They open their mouth, you're like, red flag.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of people that stand out, I'd say more so to my clients recently is people that have just clearly invested in their panel when they get to that stage. Because again, there is a lot of people just doing a numbers game, but the ones that will double down and not just spend an hour tweaking a slide they had from 3 years ago or a deck from 3 years ago. They're actually investing by researching the company, looking at case studies, looking at YouTube content, and just really hitting home and swinging for the fences in their panel. They're the ones where on our Slack channel, the client will even ping us a sneaky message just saying, "Holy, this is great. We've never, this is our person." It's difficult because we see a lot of stuff as agency recruiters, and I'm at the point of doing it again for the best part of 10 years. It's like nothing surprises me. Well, that phone call or that change of decision, that signing of contracts and not showing up. We tend to laugh at the more negative stories as opposed to remember that was really good. Do you know what I mean? A few spring to mind, but one where someone's like, I've got an offer from X company, but I'm going to take the opportunity with your customer. I'm like, okay, cool. And then things didn't work out after like maybe 120 days. And then magically, like, oh no, that's fine. I don't need to interview with anybody else. I'm like, and then yeah, it transpired he was spinning 2 jobs at once. There's also an instance where my business partner flew out to another region to see a customer just to be told that who we'd placed had not even opened their laptop for a month, and that was their first month. So just little things like that do stick with you. But if you don't, again, you can't take things personally in this game, right? People are doing things to improve their own careers.
So give me the red flags. A lot of people are going to be listening, are looking for jobs right now.
Weak reasons for leaving, which that's a case by case basis. But I mean, that's usually a good telltale sign of how strong the candidate or the person is. But I mean, to double down on that, again, why a lot of people kind of fail interviews, and we do our best to sometimes coach it out of them, is really falling into a negative tangent about either, who they reported to or just a company in general. Because again, on most occasions, the person that you're talking to wants it to be a positive experience, and I'm sure the candidate does as well. But the first thought they get is, wow, if they leave us in a year, is that how they're going to talk about me? And it just gives them serious pause on them as a person. So it's again, maybe leveraging yourself, leveraging goes on, how to position it in a positive light, because you don't need to go too into the weeds. It needs to be clear, concise, cute, as positive as it can be. I mean, sometimes there needs to be a mini negative in there because you've left for a reason, right? But you just don't need to kind of really dwell on it too much. So 2, which again I know people will say, you kind of countering what you said before, but consistent rescheduling. Again, I said have your opportunity ranked 1 to 4, but if you're number 4, you push back 4 times, the chances are they're going to say this person's not really interested. And the same with us. If our calls and our screening calls continue to get pushed back or missed, we also lose an appetite to represent you as well.
Can I put a caveat in there? Rescheduling with appropriate notice as well.
Yes,
there have
absolutely.
been so many candidates that I've nixed off because it's a last minute, and it's, I mean, if there's like a good reason, things happen, emergencies happen, but it's like, don't wait last minute if you knew yesterday that this wasn't going to work. You're just not respecting my time at all.
Of course, yeah. I mean, even 24 hours is more than respectful. People that we know and industry friends and people that we work on behalf of with the customers, they will ask us, how's the candidate been with you? I personally, and as a business, I appreciate when candidates do want to run their own campaign because they may have had a bad experience with a recruit in the past. We can do our best to try and convince them otherwise, but if they've already got kind of PTSD and they just want to run their own campaign, fine, we'll leave them to marry it up. But if they, kind of maybe a little bit rude or obnoxious to us, we're not afraid of speaking to our customer to let them know what their true character is. And I think especially candidates who may know that they are desired do forget that, and that's a game where we can actually influence. That's one of the small influences that we can potentially make to the hiring decision, but again, I would say it's only a very small fraction, and it's also very rare that happens as well, Pleasant, but that's certainly a red flag for me.
Yeah, Gareth, character is like a huge thing, especially now with what we have seen, how social media can promote or just absolutely destroy a person's career with the character that they show. It doesn't matter who in the interview process people are talking to. You have to respect them as much as you want to get that respect back. It's almost like the little dating analogy, how does someone treat a server that's giving you your order and you're taking your food orders at a restaurant and working their butt off, and the way that you're interacting with them and how you tip them, how you're appreciative, like that's always been one of my telltale signs of,
absolutely.
People that are helping you, that are there, they're doing their work, they're working hard, and don't be jerks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it used to be one of my interview questions. What's one of your biggest pet peeves, inside the workplace and outside the workplace? And my number one outside is people who are rude to waiters, because you see it all far too common.
Completely. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I feel comes up a lot. I would love your perspective on this. How do I address the fact that I got fired, or the fact that I've been out of work for an extended period of time looking for jobs, but have not been able to land one?
It's $1 million question. It's like, should I put open to work? Should I not put open to work? It's tough. And I think for me, I know this is a bit of I'm going to swear, a bit of shithousery maybe, but I try and put it back on the candidate on what they think is best, because in the hiring boom, some people go, well, I've kept it that I'm still working on LinkedIn. But then again, we know that the back channels are happening more than ever, and they're like, that person's not even there anymore. I mean, it is tough. So, I mean, in terms of being fired, if there's a chance of being back channeled, I mean, I'd say, look, just be honest, or try and articulate it as best you can. So if it's a bit conflict in leadership or you disagree with leadership, it's a case of minimalizing that and just being clear and concise. With regards to being out of work for a period of time, again, I've been asked a million times, should I lie, should I not? And I'm like, I don't want that burden on my shoulders, because if somebody does back channel you and then my advice has cost you an offer, I'd feel pretty shitty about that. So it's tough. It's really tough to advise on those two. And I appreciate you've asked it, because it is a tough question, but that's just my out loud thoughts. I mean, I'll kind of say, look, you can do this, but it's got to be your final decision, because again, if it costs you an offer, it'll cost me a night's sleep.
Do you find that a lot of people that you work with will actually tell you the truth versus ones that kind of hide it throughout the process, and then you find out a little later on? I mean, do you feel like people are upfront with you about their current status?
It genuinely, again, number one, depends on the relationship. If it's a revisit candidate or a boomerang candidate, as you say, then they're usually very, very honest. Then there's other people that will be speaking to multiple recruiters, and sometimes they receive the advice to say, look, say you're still in work, because it means that you're more valuable. So some yes, some no. wouldn't have any statistics to present. What's usually a telltale sign is they get the offer, they get the contracts, and they can start the following Monday, not in 2 weeks' time.
It's either a telltale sign that they don't care if they're going to screw you over. So let's just run one more topic here just to wrap this up. I want to talk about another $1 million question, which is people are interviewing a lot. It's super competitive and they are in interview fatigue because they're just not getting roles. What is your take right now? Why people are not getting those callbacks when they look great on paper and they doing their shtick? What do you think's going on?
It can purely be a lot of factors as to why people get laid off. There's a lot of factors as to why people do or do not get hired. But I mean, from a company perspective, I think times have changed. People are hiring and wanting more for less. 2022, I know I keep saying that, but it was a very easy year for anyone in recruitment. Someone to get around a Series B, we need 10 A's, 3 SEs, and it was just like there wasn't no quality control, but people were getting hired a bit easier. Now it's numbers are doing okay, but to forecast for 2026 in this instance, we need maybe 2 more AEs. People are being very, very picky on who they bring on board. Now, there's also, as I mentioned at the start of the session, there's a lot of pressure from, inflated expectations from the board and from investors that, that puts pressure on the CRO, which then stems to the VP, which means they're also scared to make a hiring mistake. So again, that kind of goes back to my point of where we have the bit of weight to say, speak to this guy. I can't, Gareth, they're not from the space. And it's like, okay. So, I mean, there's a lot of that going on. But again, we've seen it time and time again. People historically will pay us to hire people from the space or a competitor. But, are they always going to work out and be the best individual? You can't guarantee that until they're in the seat, So it's also frustrating because it is nice to make that placement, right? Do that industry flip, someone from MarTech to another industry just because they're credible and a good salesperson and, good energy and well sales trained. There's just very, very little of that going on at the minute. But I just think why people are not getting callbacks is there's probably someone more relevant. That's, always number one. But you should be informed that, right? Sorry, we're moving forward with another candidate. But with companies trying to staff, they need to add to the team, but they're trying to add on a minimal people to get the maximum results because they know that, they miss out with Silicon Valley Bank, that people, they need to look profitable. They need to have decent P&Ls to attract investors for additional rounds or, potential buyers. And that's the reality here. And what we've also seen is candidates getting their new quotas and it's like a ridiculous amount. And people are thinking we can get this out of this individual next year. But the reality is they're on the phone to me or another recruiter because they just know the expectations are outrageous. So
people do need to assess that because you're going to find yourself in a position in 6 months where you're looking for something else because you're miserable. You've got a fat paycheck on the back end, but ultimately, you've sold your life away. You have to have that balance.
Yeah, so I mean, there's no right or wrong. There's an instance recently. I met up with a candidate who was like, "Look, I'm in for a position." A meeting with the person who was looking to bring them on board, and it was just like literally being July until recently, like maybe a month ago, where they pulled the trigger on the hire, and it was like, right, okay, we're going to offer you this position, then that position, and you can imagine when it comes to the point of finally closing, an individual is then like, do I really want to take this job? Some people still have to. We can't control that. Right, we can't ring up a CRO and say, "Look, you need to do this," because the reality is, he's just going to say, "I can do what I want." It's Michael,
Yeah. Thanks for the advice.
Yeah, thanks but no thanks.
Do you think that there's a threat of this AI laziness in the interview and preparation process, even the application process?
Yes. I do think people are relying on AI a little too much. I think we both know you can see it. Yeah, you can see one example I actually posted on LinkedIn about was I wasn't working on this search, but I still work with a customer that was looking for an account manager on the East Coast, and they must have put the brief into ChatGPT or whatever, and they both, two different candidates, didn't know each other, both had one identical slide each, which then the hiring manager poked at it and they just both crumbled in the session because they got the information and it looked great, but they didn't understand the context they were delivering. So again, I think it's a good tool to have. But there's somebody who lives in my building. She does like student housing. There's AI applicants even going into that, which then meant that when they was going to kind of meet and greet and see the applicants to house, that some of these people weren't even real.
Oh,
It's causing issues somewhere. But again,
Yeah,
I'm not a complete AI specialist.
I'm not either, but I know that there are the telltales. I was talking to someone who had just built a website, and I sent them a screenshot, and I was like, "Oh, you should probably remove that M dash. That way, it doesn't look like you just generated." And he was like, "Everybody knows that that's what's happening right now. I don't even care at this point." And I was thinking, okay, that is such a mentality, and it is screwing people out of jobs because
It is.
they're hitting apply, 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 apply. We see all those reels about all of the things that you can do. And it's like, if everyone's doing it, you're going to get the same outputs as everybody else. So, how better to stand out than to just be freaking human and use it as a guide? So, that's my little PSA on AI there for you. But one thing we haven't talked about, just real quickly, what is advice that you would give companies to do better, either throughout the interview process or creating their job recs? What could companies do better with?
I mean, it's just timing and schedule. And if they say they're going to treat it with importance, treat it with importance. But again, there's only so much influence we can have on that. But typically, we're employed for a reason, so it's down to us to share the feedback. So it's not typically on them, but it is also giving detailed feedback. Sometimes it's just a no, why no? And they don't really want to get into it, but that doesn't help anybody, right? It doesn't help us improve on the search. It also doesn't help the candidate with their, future interview processes. Like anything, whether it's a relationship, work, personal, communication. Everyone needs to be better at communication. And if you nail that on the head, it's typically a positive experience for all, right?
All right, Gareth, would you leave anyone who's listening with your hit list? What are the top 3, top 5 things that you need to be aware of when you're preparing for your interview, or why you might be stuck, something that you might be able to do to tweak and change to see if there's a different result?
Treat your job search like a sales cadence, plain and simply. You have your target account list as you would as an AE, and you have your prospect list. So you'll have your hot accounts, your tier 1, 2, 3s. Make a list of the companies that you have applied to or approached. Go one further, try and message the person who's on the job advert directly to stand out. Cold call them. Everyone says cold calling's dead. It's not. I had like 3 great conversations on the back of cold calling yesterday. It shows obviously that you're eager, but honestly, one of the simplest ones, and I know there's a lot of recruiters who whinge about this, hypocritical, right? It's just reading the job advert. Because if you're not aligned to it, if you're not completely aligned to it, then the chances are, first of all, you're not only affecting your own chances, you're affecting other people's chances. But I appreciate it's dog eat dog. But 2, if you're in the frame for a company that maybe it doesn't align with your background, then the chances are you're going to invest a lot of time, effort, and energy just to get to maybe mid stages, late stages. And again, people are going to maybe kind of hate on this, but it's those typically who've come from a competitor or an adjacent business who will get the offer, or at least be the first person to offer it. If they don't take it, you may still have a shot. But yeah, just make sure it's aligned and don't spray and pray your applications. We personally don't do job ads anymore for that very reason, because we're sifting through high volumes and it's very low quality, respectfully.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just purely headhunt now, and it saves us hours and hours and hours a week.
Love it. So if I were to sum up just what I'm hearing from you, first, do your due diligence and don't muddy the water with the little shiny things or the things that you're hoping for, but really stick to your lane and have that focus, that target preparation, and that prioritization of where you're going after. Because if you're stretching yourself, it's going to show up in your day to day. And it really comes down to professionalism. I feel like sometimes we still need classes on just professionalism in itself, and so I think that those are things that unfortunately our candidate pool is struggling with today in some aspects. But I believe in focus and target preparation, and that's ultimately how you're going to even be able to measure what's working and what's not. Because if you're doing all of these interviews and you're kind of saying the same thing over and over again, but it's like 50 different types of job roles and industries, you really can't pinpoint what's resonating or what's making you knock off the peg. And the other thing is ask for feedback.
If you're gonna ask for feedback, be open to receiving it as it is, because again, it will only help you. But I also appreciate it is a stressful time. So it's very easy for me to sit here and say, don't spray and pray. I get it. But, the reality is you'll consume more energy for the opportunities that count.
Completely. My advice to you is that don't wait till you are in the position of desperation, because that in itself puts you in this mindset of I have to do the most to get something. And that's when you tend to bastardize your values a little bit more, of like what you would take or not take, how you would see things, and you tend to make choices that are not quite aligned with what you want. But once you start smelling those little indicators of this is my time to change, that's when you should be planning and preparing for it. So that way you can have the choice to do something versus, that choice being removed for you and you're just going to take whatever you can possibly get. So Gareth, I have loved talking to you. I'm so appreciative that you joined today and that you gave all of this advice, because it is so critical right now in our market. So I'm going to leave your link in the description, and folks, especially startups that are looking to hire like world-class AE salespeople, people that are in high value revenue positions, and you don't want to make those mistakes. You don't want to take all the time in the world screening through those piles of candidates, which there are so many. Gareth is your guy. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
1, 2.